So we're going to go ahead and get right into it. And I'm pleased to announce our next speaker. It's Vernon Silva. Vernon is a dialysis social worker for 24 years, functioning as a direct care practitioner in dialysis clinics, as well as the patient service coordinator at ESRD Network 17 and 18. Vernon studied healthcare administration at California State University, Long Beach, as a full scholarship recipient under the Latino Healthcare Professionals Project for bilingual, bicultural, first-generation college students before obtaining an MSW from UCLA. As a licensed clinical social worker, Vernon functions as a behavioral therapist providing psychotherapy. So I want to welcome Vernon. And Vernon, just let us know when you're ready to go to your next slide and we'll move them for you.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephanie. Thank you very much for that introduction. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon and good morning, whichever applies. You are here for Caregiver Self-Care Tips. My name is Vernon Silva. I am a nephrology social worker. I currently work at Toyabe Indian Health Project, which is located in Bishop, California, and I have been there since 2011. Next slide for an acknowledgement. I would like to take this moment to thank the ESRD National Coordinating Center for inviting me. And on behalf of the National Coordinating Center, I'd like to thank all of you participants, whether you're here as a caregiver, whether you're here as a patient or a client, whether you're here as a professional, as a layperson, whatever the case may be, we're all here to learn together, and everything that I say will most likely apply to you, and we will all become better people at the end of this for having contributed towards our collective and personal basis of knowledge. As mentioned, I do have a history with the end-stage renal disease network system, in that I have been in the past a patient services coordinator for both Network 17 and 18. And I have worked several years, as was mentioned, in dialysis clinics as a direct care worker. Next slide. Not only have I functioned with the ESRD network system, but also as a nephrology social worker, but I'd also like to direct your attention to my name there, where it does state that I do have the credential of LCSW. And you may be aware that in the state of California, that stands for a licensed clinical social worker. That means that I am sanctioned by our state to provide services congruent with that of being a psychotherapist. So today, I'll bring to you all sides of my background, which is nephrology social work, working with dialysis clients, and psychotherapy. And today we're going to take a clinical approach to our self-care tips. Next slide. I could very well give you some concrete tips that kind of make sense and that would be kind of a bit superficial. And we would all agree that they're very helpful, and it's always good to be reminded of them. And for some, they would be hearing them for the first time. But today, as I mentioned, I'm going to be taking a clinical route. I'm going to be looking at this as if you are my client in a setting where I am providing you a clinical interaction. Okay, so we're going to not only go over concrete tips, but some very clinical tips as well. So what will you need? I need for you to feel comfortable and perhaps have a pen and paper with you so that you can take notes for yourself. There'll be about 4 or 6 activities that we'll do. They will all be individual activities, and you can determine whether you just want to do the activity in your head and on your own, or whether you would like to write down or share with somebody who you are sitting with right now, or perhaps you like to be more public with your participation, and that means that you would type into the chat, and that'll be fine as well. Okay. If you have questions as the hour goes on, feel free to write them into the chat, and I'm sure that they will be pulled by um, the administration, and then they'll let us know at the end as I have left some room for some Q&A. And so feel free to use the chat, feel free to write, or feel free to just sit back and participate in that way. Because I am taking a clinical approach, I want you to, and I will say things like, do this, I want you to do this, you should do this, or so forth. I want you to understand that that should all be taken as suggestion. So let's move on to the next slide and I'll explain that. None of the options, recommendations, or suggestions should be taken as personal medical advice. Instead, I'm offering this information as educational and for informational purposes only, and they should not be considered a substitute for professional medical advice or consultation with healthcare professionals. Next. Everything that I ever say, whether it is within a clinical setting or direct care in a dialysis clinic, I offer more as a recommendation, as a suggestion, as options. And what I state to all of my clients is whatever I may say to you, I want you to personalize it. And I want you to visualize a bar across the top here, one side that says total embrace and one side that says total discard. This is going to be a continuum. And that means that please know that everything I might say, you totally could relate to, and you can embrace it completely and utilize it and implement it in your life. And all the way down over to total discard, where it just does not apply. And so you can just discard it and maybe keep it in your pocket for the future or recommend to somebody else or simply ignore it from there on out. But I want you to know that anything that I mentioned today, all of what we're calling the tips, are going to be things that I need for you to personalize and determine to what amount it's going to apply to you and your situation. Okay. Next. The first thing that we're going to do, our first activity, is for us to think within ourselves. I want you to think inside your mind. I want you to think inside your heart. I want you to think about your situation and be very honest with yourself and very open. And the first thing that I would like for you to do is be very intentional with your thoughts and with your feelings right now about this statement. What's it like to be a caregiver? What's it like to be a caregiver? Okay. To me, being a caregiver was something that I found to be very joyful. It was a chance for me to be affectionate to my mother and to tell her that I love her and to make up for times when I wasn't able to do that because I was very self-conscious and I was very embarrassed to have a public display of affection. I took care of my mother for 15 years. Now, my mother was not a person who had kidney disease, but she was the mother of one. My sister acquired kidney disease at 9 years old, and unfortunately, in 1962, renal replacement therapy, dialysis, was not available, and especially where we grew up in Albuquerque, and we lost her. And so the impact that I have of kidney disease on my family could be a lot different than maybe what yours is. But it's there and it affected our lives and it still does to this day. But as my mother got older, she required more and more care. And so the last 15 of her years of her life, starting with year 15 moving out, I used to fly home every other weekend and take care of her. Take her to mow her lawn, take her to her medical appointments, and take her to fun things. My mother was a sports fan, so I would take her to basketball and volleyball games, football games. As time went on and her needs became more and more intense, it got to the point where I asked my mother to either have me move back home to Albuquerque or for her to come out to California and stay with me. And she chose to come on out. And for the last 4.5 years of her life, I took care of her until she passed away, which was a little over 3 years ago. And one moment. And during that time, I provided care in the form of direct nursing, memory care, and family care, which I think that you could all relate to. Okay. So it was my chance to reconnect with my mother and let her know that I loved her and that I was grateful to her. So I functioned in the realm of gratitude. And to also let her know that I was sorry for anything that I might have done that gave her a hard time as her son. Okay. So being a caregiver was rough for me then, but it also was very what I call joyful. Maybe for you, being a caregiver is recommitting to the vows that maybe you took years and years ago to your spouse that said, I'll be there, whether it's sickness or in health or sickness. Maybe there are, what's it like to be a caregiver? Maybe there are emotions that you may be experiencing, which could be worry or overwhelm. Okay. Maybe you feel tiredness or fatigue, such as compassion fatigue. So let's just take a moment right now that I kind of gave you a bit of my story and also offered a few of 1,000 ways that you could feel about being a caregiver. And I want you to just take a moment to think about it, whether it's just thinking about it inside your head and your heart, writing it down, or maybe if you wanted to make it public and state what you feel about being a caregiver is in the chat. What's it like to be a caregiver? What's it like to be a caregiver? Next slide, please. So what is a caregiver then? Why don't we speak the same language here and see what it was? As mentioned, I'm going to start at the bottom of this list. As mentioned before, I was a helper to my mother. I was somebody that helped her out and with things that she couldn't do any longer or maybe couldn't do completely herself. I was a caregiver, a caretaker. I provided my mother care. I'd say, take care, or people would say, take care of your mother. Okay, looking after her. Anymore, what we call a caregiver, a caretaker, and a helper is a care partner. And that means that the power differential that we may experience from caregiver to care receiver seems to be more equalized, and at least optimally so it should be. That means that the care partner, the person who's receiving, the care receiver, has more of a function and more of a say-so in the care that they're receiving. And we as care partners, meaning the care provider, provide that care with what they have in mind, that the power differential evenly, so that we're able to offer self-determination, offer dignity. All right. A caregiver could be a mother or father, could be a brother or sister, spouse, neighbor, parent. And as I mentioned earlier, I believe we are all caregivers at some point to somebody, and we are all care receivers at some point to somebody as well. So we've all been there. Let's see what it's like to be a patient. Next. Well, what's it like then to be that care receiver? What could it be like? My mother was able to receive the joy that I offered that surrounded my care. Okay? She was the recipient. She got to receive my affection. She got to hear me say, I love you, something that I probably hadn't said in years and years. Okay. As a patient or as a care receiver, you get to be honored to receive. So you have to be open and flexible and help the caregiver. Okay. Help the caregiver be validated for their role. Okay. So I'll stop there for just a moment and let you know that one of the most important needs that all humans carry with them is two things: the need to be validated, the need to be heard. And second of all, the need to have a sense of control. So when I talk about evening out the power differential, I'm talking about our patient feeling a sense of control and our patient feeling a sense that they are validated for who they are. It's a collaboration. Next. So what is a patient in our minds, or at least in the context of today? A care receiver, and again, a care partner. So as you can see, both the caregiver and the care receiver is a care partner because the power differential was evened out as much as you can. Okay, empowering. Okay, next, please. I wanted to bring this out as well, let you know that approximately 1 in 5 Americans, according to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, is a caregiver. That means 20% of all of us who are on this call, everybody that we see out in the streets, 1 in 5 are actually caregiving at, at some point to somebody who's receiving that care. So it's a very normal thing. Okay? We're all social creatures, and even those of us who are introverted or tend to isolate require other people because of the need for caregiving as just being a human. Because at some point in our lives, all of us need to be cared for. Okay, next. In addition, most caregivers also have paid jobs in addition to the time they spend helping a friend or a loved one. I certainly did. In fact, I used to always say when I got home from work, now my job has begun, my day has begun. And for some people, caregiving is a full-time role. Okay? Whether that's formal or not, meaning that you're paid for it, like say by a state program or something, or that's just what you do. And that's just what I did as a son to my mother. It was a full-time role. I spent more time caring for my mother than I did actually working. Caregivers dedicate so much time caring for other people that it can be easy for them to forget to take time for themselves. So I laud you here. I appreciate that you're here, all the participants that I see, because you are taking that time to dedicate to taking care of yourself. All right, let's go next. That was the background. So now let's get into implementing our interventions. What are ways to care for the caregiver? Well, you set aside me time. Oh, that's very easy for me to say, okay? But I mean it. And let's see what my supportive statements are for setting aside me time. Everyone deserves time for themselves, and there's no need to feel guilty about it. It's important to establish boundaries and to designate this time for yourself. Whether it is spent reading, at the gym, or listening to music, having me time is important. It is so important because it allows you to decompress and focus on your own needs, in addition to those of your loved one. All right, let's look at that guilty word. Let's go back up to the first supporting statement. Guilty. Does that resonate with you? It certainly did with me and still does, because I feel that I could always have done so much more. But what we need to remember about guilt and feelings of guilt is that there's a timeline. And when we feel guilty about something, we're not living in the moment. We're not practicing mindfulness and being here and now. When you think about it, and I've asked you to please dig down deep inside and think, guilt really means that you are feeling remorseful about something that happened not in this moment. Well, if that's what's occurring, what I'd like for you to do is every time you start to feel feelings of guilt, to self-message, to use your inner voice to say, come back, come back, come back to now, come back to now, come back. Let's think about now. And that'll be a way to get you away from that time where you're feeling remorseful, regretful, guilty, because we're going to pull you into what is in control now. And that's this moment. And even if you still feel moments of guilt at this moment, at least you're able to address it directly here and now in order to move forward so that in the future, you're not looking back at your version of yourself right now, thinking, I regret, I feel guilty, I'm remorseful, because you've made the changes now, or you at least have dealt with your feelings about it. Guilt, if you're feeling guilty, come back to now. Now let's look at that second statement. It says it's important to establish boundaries. Oh, how easy is it to set boundaries, much less maintain them? Okay, very difficult. So I just want you to know that I don't say that lightly. It's important to establish boundaries, but there's a process. Maybe what you need to do is write it down first. What time do I need for myself? What days do I need for myself? Do I need a full night's sleep? Do I need nap time? What is it that you can establish that you need, or you can set boundaries around? And then, because you have a care partner, you have a discussion about it so that they provide input as opposed to you imposing your will or just assuming what they would come from, given that you all could have a discussion or a conversation about it. Next, please. Our first discussion point for activity. What I'd like for you all to do now is to think again in your mind, or write it down on a paper, or put your answer in the chat. And I'd like for you to really dig down and think to yourself, what do I give up as a caregiver? What do I sacrifice as a caregiver? And as you're thinking about that, I want you to see what I did. When I was a caregiver for my mother, especially those last 4 years, I completely gave up exercise. I could not go to the gym. I gave up a social life. I absolutely did not go out. I didn't have the time. I didn't have the energy to do it. What did I do? I emotionally ate, and I gave up a lot of my sleep. So these are the things that I gave up and I sacrificed as a caregiver. Think about it yourself and keep it in mind, because this is important. Okay, next slide. In order to balance and be strength-based as opposed to deficit-based, I want you to now think this. What do I gain as a caregiver? What do I acquire as a caregiver? What do I learn as a caregiver? Me, as you guys are thinking that, and I want this to be an activity, I want you to really dig down and think about this. Mine was, I got my mom back. I got the relationship that I have. I was a very distant, aloof son. As close as she and I really were, I was distant. She'd try to hug me. Yeah. She'd say, I love you. I'm like, yeah, mom. I got to offer her affection. I gained that. I got this sense of family, this reconnection with her. Okay. That's what I gained and I acquired from it. Okay. And sometimes we have to ask ourselves these questions. What did you gain? What are you gaining as a caregiver now? And what are you acquiring as a caregiver? Next. Okay. When I told you what I what I sacrificed and what I gave up as a caregiver, I actually was identifying what I really needed to be doing. I needed to be at the gym and exercising. I needed to have a social life. I needed to eat sensibly and healthy as opposed to emotionally eating. And I needed to sleep. So I want you now to identify in your head or down on your paper or in the chat what you wrote down and what you thought you were sacrificing. And I'm going to challenge you that you've identified exactly what you need right now as a caregiver. I need to work on that. Okay. And this is how you're going to do it. So out of acceptance and commitment theory is choice point. Next. Okay. Now, I usually have a pointer that I kind of direct you through, but instead, I'm going to do this all verbally. I know that this is quite a bit, but let's just take a quick look at this right now. This slide is very busy and confusing, but what we should be able to see right now is there is a circle in the middle that says choice point. Everybody sees that? And then there's a line going off to the right and a line going off to the left. Then there's a line that's going down from the choice point. You see that goes all the way down to challenging situation. This is where the timeline begins. So you will be in a challenging situation, and as time goes on, you go up the line to a choice point. What do I do at this moment? And you can choose to either go to the right, which is towards acting effectively and behaving like the person you want to be. Or you can choose the left side away from what you'd like to be, which would be acting ineffectively for the moment and behaving unlike the person that you may want to be. So I told you that I was engaged in emotional eating. Can you relate to that? I needed that immediate gratification. So what I had on my refrigerator was my choice point handout. Okay, looks just like the slide. So that when I went into the refrigerator to rate it and to get that immediate gratification and then feel lousy about it later and know that it's not effective, it would remind me of my process that I am at that moment at a choice point. And do I want to open up that fridge and move towards acting ineffectively or behaving unlike the person that I want to be? Or do I want to make a decision, a choice right now, intentionally, in the moment, and mindfully, that I'm acting effectively and behaving like the person that I want to be? Now, come all the way down to the bottom of the slide. At a choice point, you're going to STOP. You're going to stop. You're going to slow down, slowly breathe, even press your feet down just to get yourselves ready or stretch. You got to put yourself in the moment. Take notice. Notice what you are feeling and thinking. Notice the work around you and what you're doing. So in other words, be person in environment. Open up. Now we're going to work on your mind. Make space for your thoughts and your feelings and allow them to flow through you. Now 4, pursue your values. Now that you've opened your mind, what is the person that I want to be like? What is the caregiver that I want to be like? What do I visualize as being a good caregiver, as serving my care receiver and myself? Remember your values and find a way to act on them, and it doesn't matter how small. Okay? So this is how you regulate your mind's activities, your thoughts, your emotions, your decision making, and the behaviors that follow. You come to a choice point. Now think for just a moment, is there a situation that maybe is similar to you? Emotional eating? Maybe, what if I said going to the gym? Before I sat down to watch TV for an hour to just escape and veg away, maybe I needed to look at my choice point and say, I'm at a place right now where I could turn on the TV and sink in for an hour and a half, or I could go for a walk. Which one leads me towards the person I want to be? and which one leads me away? Next slide. What other ways do we care for the caregiver? You need to do something to relieve stress. Let me do my supportive statements. Take a walk, write in a journal. Everyone releases stress differently, but do what works for you. People with kidney disease can also get fit and relieve stress through exercise. All right. Again, very superficial, common sense, but let's really now investigate this. When I say take a walk, what I'm now tapping into is cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, which has a principle called behavioral activation. Behavioral activation. Behavioral activation is nature's way of producing an antidepressant or a mood elevator. Behavioral activation is getting yourself outside in the air, getting yourself outside in the light or even the sunlight. And behavioral activation is moving your body forward in space. And it doesn't matter whether it's by your feet or your legs, whether you're walking, you could be skating, surfboarding, driving, go for a drive. It could be flying in an airplane. It is somehow, for some reason, our minds are programmed to respond positively when we move forward in space. So if you've ever heard of somebody being addicted to video games, a lot of the times it's because those video games trick the mind into thinking they're moving forward in space. And so you're like flying forward to the galaxies or making your way through a complex cave system. So your mind, your hormones, the dopamine, adrenaline, and so forth, pop up and make you feel better. Antidepressant, mood elevator. So behavioral activation, when I just say take a walk, I want you to think about, move forward, because that's behavioral activation. Air, light, being outside, and moving your bodies forward. And we'll come back to that in a minute. Write in a journal. Okay. All of the things that are going on in our minds, original ideas, are pinging all around in our minds, and they morph as they do so. And they usually turn into something that's more negative than what they started out with. Okay? But when we express those minds activities, those products of our minds, and we pull them out through our mouths, or we write them down as we journal, or maybe type, okay, it freezes them in time so they can no longer morph, so that gives us a break so that we can actually look at it, examine it, see a snapshot of what's going on in our minds. And it gives you a sense of comfort, relief, familiarity. So you know where I'm headed to. Psychotherapy. Why wouldn't I? Okay. When you relieve your mind of all of the busyness in there by just saying it out loud, and I call that verbal journaling, by the way. I coined that frame. I have clients who come to me who I say, you're verbal journaling. You're just telling me everything that's going on in your life, but it's so therapeutic and so productive for you. Okay. When you do psychotherapy, verbal journaling, or writing in a journal, it helps relieve what's on your shoulders, gets it off your back, out of your chest, out of your heart, and out of your mind. Okay. So do something to release stress. Take a walk, write in a journal, or whatever releases stress for you. And when I talk about exercise, that's part of behavioral activation, because our bodies were meant to move in some form or another. Okay. The more that you're able to be active, usually going back to choice point, that moves you to the right, to the towards. Next slide, please. Let's go to solution-focused discussion number 2. You ready? I want you to ask this question to yourself right here and now. I want you to think about it in your mind. I mean, dig down into your heart. I want you to write it down on your paper if that's what you're doing, or feel free to share publicly, okay, in the chat, whatever suits you. How am I coping as a caregiver? How am I coping as a caregiver? And how am I holding up as a caregiver? I want you to really think about that. How am I coping as a caregiver? And how am I holding up as a caregiver? Wow. Thank you for asking me, Vernon. Let me really think about that because this is important. Okay? Because we're going to start to talk about mental health, which is so important. Me, as a caregiver, it gave me a sense of purpose again. I told you it gave me a sense of family. Okay? It also was a situation that induced anxiety. And I definitely had grief and low spirits over loss. Okay? All of us who are on this line are in some stage of loss and grief right now. We all are. Because chronic conditions make for loss and limitations, and we mourn them and we grieve over them. And how do we grieve over them? Remember the stages of loss, everybody, the stages of grief, even the stages of death. First of all, we're in shock and we're in denial. Okay? I can't believe this. And we get into bargaining. Oh, please, if you just give me back what I've lost, I swear I'll go to church every Sunday. Bargaining. Can you relate to that? Sorrow, depression, anger, mad, and anger at who we provide our caregiving to. Anger. And eventually some sense of stabilization. I hate to use the word acceptance, but even though that's what was given with the stages, depression, bargaining, anger, but also acceptance. And I like to think of just a stabilization, kind of a new set, okay? A new mindset, okay? We are all in that right now, and you need to recognize that. And some days you're going to have depression, and some days you're going to be angry, and sometimes the anger is going to be turned towards you and towards the person that you're giving care to. So you need to explore that, and again, somehow get in a place where you are able to express that and get it off your mind, your chest, your shoulders, and your back. Next slide. I know that this looks very complex, but I think most of you know what this is. This is a depression screening, okay? And it's called the PHQ-9, okay? A depression screening, this particular depression screening is extremely accurate, extremely accurate. And that's because whoever created it took all the components that make up or conceptualize what depression is, and in a questionnaire ask you, are you experiencing this? And to what extent? Are you experiencing this? And to what extent? Okay. And then you give yourself a point for whether it's not at all within the last 2 weeks or several days during the last 2 weeks, more than half the days or nearly every day. And you can take it and utilize it for what it's meant for you to assess how depressed you may be, if so. But really what I want you to utilize it for today is to look down that left column. And these are the signs of depression. I want you to really ask yourself, am I experiencing these? And to what extent? Number one, little interest or pleasure in doing things. The technical term for that is anhedonia. Anhedonia, which means I'm depressed. I don't feel like getting out of bed. I don't feel like doing my hair. I don't feel like brushing my teeth. I don't feel like eating. I feel listless and I feel empty. Does that describe you? Or maybe you on some days? So little interest or pleasure in doing things. How about just straight out feeling down, depressed, or hopeless? Let me continue on. Feeling nervous, anxious, or on edge. Not being able to stop or to control worrying. And here's another one about worrying. Worrying too much about everything. Are you being overwhelmed by worry? trouble relaxing, being so restless that it's hard to even sit still, restlessness, okay? Becoming easily annoyed or irritable. Irritability is one of the most common symptoms of depression, but we never think that. Feeling afraid as if something awful might happen, so a sense of dread. I want you to really take it seriously and think, am I experiencing this? Because if I am, I may be experiencing depression, but there are two types of depression. In general, there's clinical depression. That means that there's some sort of chemical imbalance in your body that regardless of your circumstances, you would have these symptoms. You would feel depressed. But there's also another depression, which is called normal reactive depression. Okay. That means anybody who is in the set of circumstances that you're in, perhaps in a caregiving situation, would feel these symptoms. So it takes the stigma away from you thinking, oh no, I can't be depressed, or that's a sign of weakness or craziness. No, it's a sign of, did you hear me say it? Normal reactive. It's a normal reaction. And if this is what we normally feel when we are overwhelmed, then it's time to speak to a professional who is not emotionally invested in your situation so that you can get all this off your mind, your chest, your back. Next. Okay. Here, there's just the scores that if you had scored a 1 to 4, it'd be minimal depression up to mild, up to moderate, up to moderately severe, or severe depression in case you needed to, if you wanted to take the screening yourself. And you may have, they do that at many medical offices. Next. What about anxiety? This is a screening for anxiety, okay? How many days out of the last 2 weeks did you find yourself feeling nervous, anxious, or on edge? Not at all. Several days, more than half the days, nearly every day. Not being able to stop or control worrying. Here we go to the worrying again because it overlaps with the depression as a symptom. And worrying too much about different things. Trouble relaxing. Okay. Oh, this looks like this is the feeling afraid as if it might happen, becoming easily annoyed or irritable. Oh, I think this might be part of the PHQ-2 that accidentally made its way onto this slide. But at any rate, the GAD-7, General Anxiety Disorder 7, is 7 questions about anxiety, very similar to the depression. Okay, and you'd want to take that as well. And I guess you'd have to Google it. Next question, next slide. So like the depression screening, the points would be equivalent to whether you're experiencing mild anxiety, moderately to severe anxiety, or even severe anxiety. If you find that you are testing positive, either anecdotally, like you just think so, or technically you've actually taken these screeners, then my recommendation is find a counselor. Next. What are other ways to care for the caregiver? Do something to relieve stress. Caregivers aren't invincible. They can also get sick, and it's important to keep healthy or it'll be difficult to care for someone else. Be careful to not take care of another's health needs to the detriment of your own emotional and physical health. Listen to your body for cues. Eat meals sitting down earlier rather than on the go. And aim to get in your 6 to 8 hours of sleep each night. I know, easier said than done. And schedule regular checkups and be sure to see your own doctors, okay? So I'll use the typical example. When you're on an airplane, what do they tell you? If the oxygen is engaged, you need to put your oxygen mask on first before you assist those around you, including your children and those who you provide care to, okay? Place your oxygen mask on first. And you can self-message through CBT that as well, self-messaging. I need to put my oxygen mask on first. Because if you're also feeling that sense of your caregiver is dependent on your being able to function, then if something happens to you, you both go down. Okay? Do something to relieve the stress. We're not invincible. Put your oxygen mask on. Next. So our solution focused discussion number 3. Ready, everybody? Clean your slate for a moment. Think about it. What is my attitude as a caregiver? What is my mindset as a caregiver? Again, what is my attitude as a caregiver and what is my mindset as a caregiver? Okay. Me, I'm like most people, we tend to, and this is kind of a biologically supported through CBT, we all tend to go to the negative because at some point we used to have to survive, constantly be thinking about surviving. And we did that for however long humans have been here. And so like instincts in animals, it has been embedded into our DNA. And so we almost naturally think, what could go wrong? We think we go to negative, we go to worst case scenario. These are called intrusive thoughts. Because now that we don't live in survival mode, but we now live in coping mode, they still appear as a product of biology, and it puts us out of balance into negative. So you have to think about being proactive and positive, rational and proactive. Okay. What is my attitude as a caregiver? What is my mindset as a caregiver? Okay. Next. CBT states that action precedes motivation. Okay. So in order for me to learn to place the positive and the rational first before negativity, I need action. I need to not wait until I'm motivated to do so or motivated to do my behavioral activation. Okay. What I need to do is I need to just do it, force myself, if I may, to do what you're going to do, and the mood will follow. I did not want to go to the gym. I did not go to the gym, and I still did not want to go to the gym. But if I force myself to go, or for that walk, okay, but if I force myself to go, all of a sudden I go, oh my God, this feels good. Oh, I'm so glad I did this. The mood followed the action. I didn't wait until I was in the mood to go to the gym. I just did it and the mood followed, knowing in the back of your mind that that is what's going to happen. Your mood is going to follow. Okay. So regardless of how you're feeling about doing any kind of action, doing yard work, at your choice point, eating healthily, know that in the back of your mind, even though you're kind of not in the mood and you're forcing yourself, the mood will follow. Again, behavioral activation. Get outside into the air, get outside into sunlight and light, and move forward in space. It is nature's antidepressant and mood elevator. Next, ways to care for the caregiver going on. Accept others' offers to help and ask for help when you need it. If, again, it applies to you, embrace this or discard or anything in between. Accept others' offers to help and ask for help when you need it. Remember that you don't have to do it all the time, or maybe you do. Perhaps other people are willing to help, but may not know how to help or even how to offer. And we ourselves are very reluctant to ask for help. Rather, speak up when you're in need and give people specific tasks to assist you, even if it just means letting someone else drive your loved one to a dialysis treatment or a medical appointment. There may be organizations that may help with transportation or personal care or some sort of respite or meals. Okay. You can speak to your dialysis clinic social worker for more information about these resources. Okay. The point here is that those who surround you are usually more willing to help than we give them credit for, and we need to allow ourselves to delegate some of those tasks that we feel only we ourselves can do. Next. So what we've been talking about all this time is action. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And it seems like it adds that much more on your plate, and I apologize for that. But it's a good investment because in the long run, it will pay off and it'll actually decrease the amount that's on your plate, that's on your dashboard. But I wanted to also list things that are passive, things that that really you do need to refuel with. Because if all we're going to be doing as a caregiver is doing, giving, providing, then we're going to, our fuel tank is going to diminish, and we need to replenish it. So here are just some ideas. Again, embrace, discard anything in between. What works for you? Get a massage, pedicure, manicure, facial. Get some sleep. Rest, meaning lounge, actively lounge back and do nothing, or do what you like. In other words, give yourself treats. Okay. Read a good book. Close your eyes and put a warm washcloth over your eyes. Listen to some nice music. Chat with somebody that you just like to chat about anything about. Take a bath. Soak your feet. Go get your hair done. Go get your hair cut. Next. Continuing on with our ways to care for the caregiver, connect with others who understand what you are experiencing. Please remember that you're not alone in this. Remember, 1 in 5 of all of us is caregiving. You're not alone, and all that you're feeling is normal. There are support groups that exist to connect caregivers with other caregivers in similar situations. Some of these meet in person while others take place online or over the phone to form a community of individuals who understand one another's situations that are usually similar. And you can also speak with a friend, a clergy member, or, as you hear me advocating, a therapist for more one-on-one support. Next. There are a lot of resources on the internet and on Amazon, but I did go to the talk of this person, Vicki Kind. She has a book titled Caregiver's Path to Compassionate Decision Making. It was excellent. Her talk was excellent too, and I got a lot out of it when I was caring for my mother. I recommend it. You might want to check it out. Okay, next slide. So we went over 3 formal discussion points for which I was offering tools, techniques, strategies, resources for you to possibly consider or contemplate applying to your situation, personalizing your way. Okay. I offered it in the context of certain theoretical approaches like ACT or CBT, okay, acceptance and commitment theory, cognitive behavioral therapy, okay. But now it comes time that I'm open to any questions that might come through the moderators or maybe on the chat. And we have a little over 5 minutes to go. Anything that somebody would like to ask or express?
Well, first, Vernon, thank you so much for that great presentation and sharing your personal experiences of being a caregiver. And, when you were saying that, I think you just hit a good point about probably sometime in all of our lives we will become a caregiver, or on the opposite end, needing to receive, some care from a caregiver. So I think even us that are not affected by kidney disease, it's still a very important point in our lives. So I wanted to say that the chat was very active while you were speaking. They did get engaged and were putting in some of their thoughts about either being a caregiver or what they've given up. So there was a lot of good discussion going on. And there was somebody who said earlier on, come back to now is so powerful, that you used early on in your presentation. Yeah, so a lot of things they gave up. They gave up, their lives, their going to church, their time with friends, family, loved ones came in. And somebody said they liked the choice point therapy. And yeah, a lot of good discussions. We shared out that where the GAD-7 and the PHQ-9 can be found. And here's a quote from somebody as a caregiver. I'm coping with an increase of optimism, hope, sympathy, empathy, kindness, nurturing, overthinking, racing thoughts, frustration, annoyance, edgy but holding up my effective communications, statements of affirmation, self-motivation, problem solving, encouraging myself, patience, remaining active, endurance, conflict resolution, therapy, counseling, family support, and circle of friends. She wrapped that all up into one. That was very nice. Yep, no, thank you. Good information everybody is putting in there, Vernon. Good topic. Thank you in advance for sharing your life experiences. Very helpful and good information. See, I thought it was a quite. Let me go back. Let me go around, scroll through real quick because
And then if you want to go ahead and advance the next slide as well. Thank you. So as you can see here, this is contact information that goes, contact information for contacting me that goes directly to me. So please know that if you do have questions, you have input, maybe you're looking for the exact choice point template that I have, because I know that there are various ones that are out there under ACT. I can direct you to the website that actually offered the one that speaks to me the most, or if you need to give a call as well. Okay, so please know that you can contact me. And will you be distributing the slides?
Yeah, they're going to be posted to give us, usually it takes just a couple days, about 3 to 5 business days before we get the slide deck and the recordings pulled together and posted on our website. So they will be available.
Okay, so everyone, please see that, I didn't realize that the GAD-7 didn't make it over the same way that the PHQ-9 did, but it's just as important to see if you might feel like you're experiencing an imbalanced amount of anxiety. So I know that I believe you had said that somebody had put in the chat the website to get you to a GAD-7. These are tools for you. I know this was all very clinical, but I wanted to reach us at that level. And according to what you're saying and what I'm seeing on the chat, I'm hoping that it was helpful to you to think about it from a clinical or a psychotherapist perspective. Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Vernon. Thank you. And I think by the way the chat was going on when you were presenting, I think definitely people did stop and think, reflect, and looked back, and that was very helpful. So thank you again so much for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.